Now, on the continuum of right and wrong, we have a polarity. On the one hand, we have energy being spent that makes things chronically worse. That's wrong, meaning it increases unnecessary suffering without creating any benefit. There's no intelligent benefit to justify the cost. And since all human beings want to feel sustainably better and want to avoid feeling chronically worse, it's wrong when we head in the direction of energy being spent to increase suffering. And what's right is energy being spent to create sustainable well-being. So let's look at this, because in a fractal understanding of a cultural system, in a fractal looking through a fractal lens, when you look at a detail, you understand the entire system. And we, of course, cannot understand the entire system. We have to look at the details we can examine and look at what's happening on that basis. So this is a moment in my day. It's a letter from the Contractor State License Board in California. And there's a number of trends and principles and dynamics at work within this letter and within this organization in general. And so the Contractor State License Board is the board that governs what is legally permissible to do and not do by contractors. And so as a landscape contractor, I was required to get a license from the California Contractors State License Board, CSLB, when I opened up shop. Now, a lot of people do not get licenses in California because of things like this. And so one of the problems when you abuse power is people become outlaws, meaning they step outside of the system because they view the system as more harmful than being outside of it, all things being equal. But nonetheless, I took a test. It was a relatively easy test, and it doesn't teach or test ethics in any way, which is an interesting omission. So I'd first say that in my first engagement with CSLB, it didn't teach how to treat employees. It didn't teach or test for client ethics or understanding of business, etc. So the things that are really important for making things work and create sustainable relationships are not even on the test. That's one thing. The other thing that's problematic is the categorization. In other words, the way that California breaks down the contractor license types do not correlate with how someone, in this case, installs a garden. So in order to install a garden intelligently and provide good service to a client, you need to prune trees at times. You need to remove small trees at times. Sometimes you need to remove big trees. You need to do drainage. You need to do irrigation. You need to do soil amending. You need to grade the soil. You need to place decorative boulders. You need to put plants. You need to extend electricity outlets, etc., etc. It's a big field. You need to put in swimming pools. You need to take out swimming pools. You need to fill swimming pools. It's a big field. And you want someone with an overview of all of those things, because when you lack an overview and you make a decision based on a very narrow point of view, which it happens when you get too specialized, then you make a decision that's good within the parameters that you're focusing, but is bad for the client. because it has a cost in other areas that are not being focused on, that are worse than the benefit that is being focused on. That's a bad decision. So you want people with an overview. However, the license categorization is asking you to be solely in an area. So the C27 doesn't cover about 40% of what I actually need to do to get my job. And that just tells me that there's not an understanding of what a client needs at the government level categorizing the licenses. So that's the first problem. The second problem is the lack of emphasis on what matters, meaning they're asking you to answer the wrong questions, or at least less important questions. Now, the next issue I have with CSLB comes a little bit later when I'm out of town for a couple of months, and they send me a bill. And they say the bill has to be paid at this amount of time. I say, I'm out of town. Would you accept a credit card? Or will you mail me the bill out of town so I can write you a check, etc.? They wouldn't. They wouldn't accept online payment. They wouldn't accept a credit card. So by sending the bill just before, they send this bill every 2 years, but by sending the bill just before or just after I left on vacation, then I cannot pay the bill. So this is incompetent because it's a government office, and this is the basis of the incompetence. It's the monopoly power. It's incompetent. In the sense that no pizza joint, the most basic businesses in a free market system all accept PayPal, credit card, Bitcoin, whatever it is. But the government refuses to do what every other basic business does because it doesn't have to. It can abuse monopoly power and say, do it this way or else, right? So I cannot pay my bill. So the bill is late. Now, the next abuse of power, which no contractor can do, in other words, if the government was regulating my business and I charged a 50% late fee on my customers, meaning one of my customers didn't pay one of my bills, and then I add 50% to the bill, the government would actually say that I'm being predatory and am abusing, the professional position, etc., and I cannot charge such a high late fee. That's what they've done to credit cards and various businesses. But you just don't treat your customers that way. It takes the hostility of a government towards its people in a monopoly power situation to say, well, because we're incompetent and won't accept payment by credit card or PayPal, etc., when you're traveling, then you have to pay a 50% late fee. You see, and there's no recourse in this thing because of the monopoly power structure. They're saying basically, if you don't follow our dictates, you don't get to work. We'll arrest you and fine you for working, right? That's what they have over your head. So it's not a very nice system, a system that basically threatens your survival, security, reputation, your livelihood, unless you follow inane protocols. But that's the system we have. Now, there's no protestation. I wrote to the governor about this. I said, the problem, as far as I can tell, is you won't do things online like everyone else in the information age and reject payment. The second problem is you're not reasonable. You don't, if a client emails me and says they're out of town, can I pay them later? I might say, well, there's a hardship here, or could you do this or this? We'll work something out. But there's no reasoning with the Contractor State License Board in California. So the governor ignored the letter, right? People are being hit with 50% penalties. People are being punished for the incompetence of the government agency. And that's fine with the governor. So there's no real recourse around this. You can either go without a license and risk, various penalties and this, that, and the other. Now, another abuse of power comes a little bit later. As I moved my company from Mystical Landscapes to Mystical Landscapes, Inc., I basically became an S Corp. The same company, same person, etc. Now, the Contractor State License Board said, you're now an Inc., so you need to apply for a new license. But I just paid the $400 for the old license. So I said, why don't you give me the $400 back? Then I'll give you $400 for the new license. They said, no, we don't give refunds. That's a convenient abuse of power, isn't it? When I put in a faulty product for my clients and they want a refund, I just say, I don't do refunds. And they can't go to another company because I'm the government, right? So we have the third abuse of power. So we just didn't apply for a license, for 2 years. So you have insanity again. But they're getting more invasive, you see? They've decided that it's their job to decide who owns a company in the United States. And they're doing it based on criminal records. And so today, I'm asked to go get fingerprinted and submit one copy to the FBI. I'm asked to pay for this, right? So I'm asked to take an afternoon of my time, not to help my clients, not to do anything useful, but to actually waste more people's time. So government money, my money, is being spent to further tax. So already you have to wonder, what exactly does the Contractor State License Board do for $400, right? They just sign a few bits of paper. It's a tax. The late fee is another tax. It's really not clear, other than perhaps going around and harassing contractors with those proceeds, what exactly they're doing. They've never done anything for me or any of my customers. But nonetheless, I'm asked to fingerprint myself and take an afternoon and pay the fee and fill out 3 forms so that the Contractor State License Board can evaluate whether or not I should be running a landscape company. Now, I happen to be in the position where, other than a speeding ticket from time to time, I've never been in court, never been arrested, never been in jail. So this doesn't really affect me, other than wasting an afternoon of my time and becoming an extra tax. But let's go through this logic a little bit here. My money is being spent to fund all of this, because if I don't pay my taxes, they will steal my house, arrest me, stop me from working, and destroy my family. That's the cudgel that the government has. As it's a free country. You don't have to pay your bribe, your cut, to continue to be able to work. Criminals, when they go around, asking for a cut, they're basically just copying government protocol and doing it much more efficiently. But what they're saying is that if I've been arrested and have a criminal record in the past, they may not renew my license. Now, here's an interesting thought. With Yelp and with Google Media and with all the various app and review places, and with 29 years in the business, If clients didn't think that I was fit to do their project, they've got plenty of choices. I have no choice but to deal with autocrats. Clients have more than 100 competent professionals to choose from. And they don't have to hire me, right? They're not idiots. But let's just say that I was egregiously arrested for a marijuana possession charge, another, entire tangle of, unnecessary cruelty and stupidity, where OxyContin, et cetera, is allowed and marijuana. Let's just say that I was arrested for possessing a joint 10 years ago. How are my clients benefited if the supply of landscapers is reduced by their government in order that, they have to compete with for fewer landscapers, which raises their prices, supply and demand? If I'm taken off for that, how does that help the client? If the client looks at that landscaper and they're doing great creative work, how are they benefited by their government saying that person can't run a company? They're not. So the client is hurt. But you also have an underlying rationale here, which is saying that apparently the criminal justice system isn't working. Meaning that if you committed a crime and you've been put through the criminal justice system and then been released, that you're not fit to run a company. So the question is, why then are we arresting more people per capita than almost any country, and certainly developed country? Why is the US justice system consuming so much public resources if it's not working? Meaning, if the government isn't doing their job to help someone who's harming others to not harm others, and let's just take the marijuana charge again. So someone was arrested for 10 years for smoking a joint. Well, all the data says this is a faulty crime in the first place. But so the government thinks it's in everyone's interest to spend $1 million of taxpayer money for a $100,000 a year prison sentence, and that person has come out after 10 years of wasting their lives, disrupting their family, and $1 million of taxpayer money, and they're now wanting to run a landscape company. Well, if $1 million of public money makes someone unfit to run a landscape company, then the prison system, the justice system, is not doing their job. They are abusing privilege. They're abusing taxpayer money by spending $1 million to do nothing or make things worse. Well, that's exactly what they do. They do nothing or make things worse. But whose responsibility is that? The person smoking a joint didn't say, I'd like to go to prison and spend $1 million of taxpayer money to make things worse. They were forced to by an abuse and an abusive government. So if it doesn't work, why isn't the CSLB going to the criminal justice system and saying, get your act together. Stop spending $1 million of people's money to make people worse. If it is working, then they've done their time and should be able to start a business. Now, what's the CSLB's logic? What do they think is going to happen if someone doesn't test right for fingerprints, right? But they need to take care of their family and run a business. Now you've created an outlaw. So they're going to be off the books. Now, what's going to happen next? They're not going to pay an abusive agency $400 every 2 years for nothing, so that's a good thing. But it's not a good thing if the if the license boards, think that there's a positive outcome and they think that they're a beneficial agency. That's not a good thing. If they're already an outlaw and they can't declare their income, they may start taking cash and get cash benefits and stop paying some or all of their taxes. Is that what the CSLB is interested in? And if they require employers to do criminal checks on employees, is that their next move? And then what are they going to do then? So you create criminals by inventing crimes. The crime here is that we're wasting time and energy by mandate to invade the public's right to choose who they want to have done, their landscaping done by. So the outcome is not beneficial. And I feel less interested in paying taxes. I feel less interested in supporting this level of incompetence. And I resent having to spend my afternoon proving that after 29 years, A, I don't have a criminal record, and B, if I do, that I still have the ability to do what I've done for 29 years, and which my reviews and website and all that in my books, purport. This is a very small fractal piece of a direction of government, and it's not a good one. No one benefits from this information. The IRS doesn't benefit, the CSLB doesn't benefit, I don't benefit, and certainly my customers do not benefit from this intervention by mandate.